Just for the thrill of hunting, two willful elders spent a fortune to buy a lion. They held their rifles ready, waiting for Walter to open the wooden cage, but the lion inside showed no aggression, merely lazily burped. This was clearly a substandard product discarded by the zoo, completely inconsistent with the publicity. The two instantly lost interest in hunting and even considered arguing with the seller. Unexpectedly, Walter said, "Keep the lion as a pet, and he will be fully responsible for its food and daily care." Initially, the two elders refused, but then thought that if the lion regained its vitality and ferocity, a thrilling hunt could still be possible. Thus, 14-year-old Walter acquired his first pet, and his relationship with his two uncles would be completely changed because of this lion. A few days ago, at his mother's insistence, Walter was sent to a remote countryside, where he had to spend the entire summer with two unacquainted uncles. Rumor has it that these two uncles disappeared for a full 40 years in their youth. After their return, they became wealthy, owning assets worth millions of dollars. Therefore, May, Walter's mother, had a very clear goal. She wanted Walter to establish a good relationship with the two childless uncles so that he could inherit their estate in the future. However, as soon as he got out of the car, Walter was stunned. Who would live in an old, dilapidated wooden house? Moreover, 4 dogs and a sturdy pig suddenly ran out from inside. They tore at Walter's pants, clearly not welcoming the arrival of mother and son. Nevertheless, May insisted on seeking out the uncles who were fishing and enthusiastically introduced herself. The two elders looked confused, not knowing who the visitors were at all. It turned out they were distant relatives. If the elders weren't wealthy, they would never have contacted each other in their lifetime. The uncles, tired of being disturbed from their leisure, reluctantly took in Walter due to May's persistence. Before leaving, May repeatedly urged Walter to get along well with his uncles, then drove away in a hurry. In the afternoon, they sat in front of the house, lost in thought. During this time, Walter wanted to call his mother, but was told by his uncles that there was no communication facility there. Walter couldn't believe it. How could long hours be spent in this desolate wilderness? Walter's question was soon answered. A stranger claiming to be a project investment expert drove up, intending to profit from the wealth of the two old men. The uncles were already accustomed to this. They immediately grabbed their rifles and fired, causing the man to panic and run away. Walter hurriedly hid behind a pillar. All afternoon, salespeople came one after another, but were all driven away by gunfire. Walter finally understood that using guns to chase away uninvited guests was the uncle's daily pastime. Because there were no spare rooms in the house, Walter was arranged to stay in the attic. He was afraid of the dark and reluctant to go upstairs, but faced with his more terrifying uncles, he finally summoned the courage to do so. The attic was worse than expected, cluttered with debris, and the old single bed was covered in dust. Walter was restless when suddenly a key fell, and the wooden box beside him sparked his curiosity. Curious, Walter opened the box, which contained only cold sand, beneath which was a yellowed old photo of a woman. Although time had eroded the photo, it could not hide the woman's extraordinary beauty. Just as Walter was pondering who she might be, a sudden noise came from outside the house. It turned out that Uncle Hub had gone outside late at night. Walter, curious, followed Hub and saw by the moonlight at the riverbank, Hub vigorously swinging a toilet plunger as if engaged in an intense fight. At that moment, Walter suddenly realized that Hub was sleepwalking, and then Walter, along with some small animals, watched Hub's performance. It wasn't until the next morning that Walter realized he had slept outdoors with a group of animals. Walter ran back to the house for breakfast and happened to hear the just-woken Hub complain, "I clearly changed to a new mattress, so why do I wake up with back pain?" Walter knew the reason, but remained silent. After breakfast, the three went to farm, but Hub lost patience after just a few shovels. What annoyed Hub even more was that a group of distant relatives came knocking, apparently after the uncle's large inheritance. The uncles went straight back to their rooms, but the relatives paid no attention. After learning Walter's identity, the relatives bluntly suggested that the uncles send Walter to an orphanage, even claiming that his mother would never come to pick him up. Upon learning that his mother would not come for him, Walter, heartbroken, ran to the town's phone booth, called the address his mother had left, but was told no one was there. After confirming he had been deceived by his mother, Walter, unwilling to be sent to an orphanage, took a map and prepared to search for his mother alone. Fortunately, the uncles found Walter in time. Hub, already annoyed by strangers, desperately wanted to send Walter away, but Uncle Garth, unable to bear seeing Walter wandering outside, tried his best to persuade him to return home. The next day, under the scorching sun, Garth handed Walter an ice-cold cola, while the relatives' family didn't even get a glass of water. Their dislike for the relatives was obvious. At this moment, a salesperson arrived in a car, and notably, he got out and raised a white flag, clearly well prepared. Walter became curious and persuaded the uncles to check out the salesperson's goods. Perhaps there would be a surprise. As expected, the salesperson did not disappoint, bringing a well-made frisbee launcher. Just pull the handle, and the frisbee automatically shoots out, an excellent tool for practicing shooting. Therefore, the two uncles who loved firearms happily bought the launcher. The relatives, worried that the firearm might accidentally harm their children, hurriedly left. Afterward, Walter became the full-time operator of the launcher, and the two uncles shot every frisbee accurately. That night, Hub once again sleepwalked to the riverbank. Walter wanted to wake Hub, but was stopped by Garth raising his hand. It turns out Garth had long known about Hub's sleepwalking habit. He once tried to wake Hub, but was instead struck by him. Walter was full of curiosity. What kind of person is Hub? Why does he have such a strong defensive instinct, yet his gaze into the distance is full of melancholy? Walter also wanted to know what stories the two uncles had experienced during the 40 years they had disappeared. Perhaps the atmosphere by the river on a summer night was too gentle, making it hard to refuse, so Garth finally spoke, recounting an unknown past. In 1914, the two brothers crossed the Atlantic Ocean thousands of miles to reach the European continent they longed for. Unexpectedly, that night they were drunkenly ambushed by two soldiers, and when they woke up, they were already on a recruitment ship heading to North Africa. Thus, the two brothers were forced to participate in the war. At that time, Garth was still a powerless intellectual who narrowly escaped death multiple times on the battlefield, relying entirely on Hub's bravery and skill, who would cross through gunfire and explosions to save Garth each time. After the war, Garth stayed in Africa for exploration and writing, while Hub continued to serve, responsible for eradicating remnants of the slave trade. Once, Hub led only 4 men deep into enemy territory, bravely and fiercely rescuing many female slaves. Coincidentally, one of them was a princess's maid, who returned safely and vividly told the princess about Hub's heroism. Walter was listening intently when Hub suddenly woke up from a nightmare, forcing Garth to stop his story. Back in the attic, Walter took out the yellowed photo again. Walter guessed that the woman in the photo was the princess from the story, but he had been unable to find the right moment to ask Garth about it, and had been waiting for a long time. Time quietly passed, and Walter's relationship with the two uncles grew closer. They worked together to cultivate land, plant fruits and vegetables, water and fertilize, but when the seeds grew into saplings, they found that the salesperson had not fulfilled his promise. The so-called tomatoes, cabbage, sweet potatoes, and potatoes were all cheap corn. Walter initially thought his uncles would learn their lesson, but unexpectedly, they invested again to buy lions, whose ferocity was far from what was advertised. But because of this, Walter was able to keep the lion as a pet. The next day, the three went to town to buy food for the lion. While carrying the goods, Hub suddenly lost strength in his legs and collapsed on the ground, and was immediately taken to the hospital for emergency treatment. While waiting outside the ward, a stranger woman asked Walter, "How can you be with these two elders? They are notorious gangsters, and their family wealth is stained with blood and dirty money." This remark made Walter suspicious, but he still wanted to hear his second uncle's first-hand explanation. So, Walter begged Garth to continue telling the unfinished story from last time. After hearing about Hub's heroic deeds, the princess vowed to meet this legendary figure, praised as a war god by his maid. One day, while riding a horse by the seaside, Hub suddenly encountered a person dressed in a black robe and an excellent rider, who charged at him unexpectedly. As North Africa's top rider, Hub is unmatched by others, and a silent race unfolds on the beach. The two refuse to yield to each other, ultimately colliding horses and falling into the water. Hub, furious and ashamed, is about to strike, but the other removes his mask. A stunning face suddenly appears before his eyes. It is a woman. A hero with great achievements encounters a breathtaking beauty. As the sunset sinks into the orange sea and the evening breeze stirs sincere feelings, they instantly decide to spend their lives together, becoming each other's true love. Previously, the princess had a marriage arrangement with a neighboring country's chieftain. When the chieftain learned of the betrayal, he directly came to take the princess by force. That night, fearing coercion, the princess clutched a dagger and prepared to commit suicide. Unexpectedly, Hub bravely ventured alone into danger, single-handedly dealing with 20 guards and successfully rescuing the beauty, beginning a happy life together. Walter found it hard to believe. The chance of winning a one-on-one duel is slim, and if Hub and the princess truly ended up together, they would have married and had children long ago. Why has Hub never mentioned this? Garth remained silent when Hub in the hospital suddenly woke up and then stormed out of the room, full of complaints. It turns out that Hub, who has served in the military all his life, fears aging the most. In his eyes, being hospitalized is a symbol of becoming useless, which he cannot accept or wish to accept. Garth understands Hub's stubbornness and his self-pity, but still advises him not to be stubborn. Death, illness, and aging are natural laws. Facing them calmly is true bravery. While they were talking, the three of them arrived at a restaurant, and Hub's mood gradually eased. As they focused on enjoying roasted meat, a group of young, spirited men barged in, shouting and provocatively insulting Hub without reason. Hub, feeling penned up and unable to vent, was suddenly triggered by their anger. Garth sensed Hub's intention to fight, did not stop him, only reminded him to avoid causing casualties, then turned and left. Moments later, Garth returned with a hunting rifle. Garth, worried that the recently discharged Hub might be at a disadvantage, also wanted him to vent his frustrations through fighting, so he supported him from behind with a weapon. Clearly, he underestimated Hub's strength. Hub fought 1 against 4, showing no signs of weakness, and even defeated all 4 opponents. Hub fought mercilessly, but also thoughtfully, not only sending the 4 young men home, but also taking out frozen meat to help them ice their swelling. At this moment, Walter remembered he had not fed the lion all day. Walter brought raw meat to the cage, but found the lion had already escaped. He hurriedly searched everywhere, only to discover that relatives, upon hearing that Hub was discharged, had come to visit under the pretext of checking on him. Out of curiosity, 2 of the relatives' children dismantled one side of the wooden box, causing the lion to escape and run toward the cornfield nearby. After understanding what happened, everyone immediately armed themselves and prepared to hunt the escaped lion. However, after crossing the cornfield, they found the lion was happily playing with Walter. Seeing this, everyone lowered their guard. Only the relatives remained anxious, insisting that if the lion was not driven away, they and their family would leave immediately. Uncle were caught off guard. They never expected such good fortune. Not only that, they also decided to settle the lion in the cornfield because it was the most jungle-like place, giving the lion a sense of belonging. After seeing off the relatives, Hub once again taught the 4 young men, instructing them on how to grow into real men. Garth, at Walter's request, recounted Hub's past stories once more. Since Hub rescued the princess, the 2 spent a peaceful and happy time together. However, the chief did not rest on his laurels. He offered a bounty of 10,000 gold coins for Hub's head. Although the brave Hub repeatedly escaped danger, who would want to live in constant fear? To resolve this dilemma once and for all, Garth disguised himself as an assassin and escorted Hub to the chief. When Garth collected the bounty and Hub was transferred to prison, they teamed up to subdue all the guards. Then, Hub walked straight to the sleeping chief. But he did not kill the chief in his sleep. Instead, he engaged in a true man's duel, eventually defeating the chief. The chief thought he would be executed on the spot, but Hub spared his life. Afterward, the chief no longer sent people to hunt down Hub. Some say the chief was afraid of Hub and ceased revenge. Others say the chief had a change of heart and appreciated the mercy. But in reality, the chief discovered oil on his territory. The chief was busy making money and had no time for grudges. Later, the chief relied on oil to become one of the world's top 5 richest men. Walter only cared about what happened to Hub and the princess afterward. Garth said, "It's best to ask the people involved, and do so quickly." Although Hub seems strong, no one knows when he might suddenly pass away. That night, Walter summoned the courage to wake Hub from his sleepwalking and ask his burning question. After a long silence, Hub revealed a secret he had kept buried in his heart for decades. It turned out that the princess later died in childbirth, and the baby did not survive. Heartbroken, Hub shut himself off from love and returned to the army, retiring and living in seclusion here after 40 years. But naive Walter doubted the story's authenticity, because Walter's mother had deceived him since childhood, making it hard for him to distinguish truth from falsehood. However, Hub said that the truth of the story was not important. What mattered was that justice, honor, courage, and love embedded within it were always worth believing in and holding on to. Earlier, when Hub admonished the 4 young men, Walter secretly pondered, when could he grow up? Walter eagerly begged Hub to take care of himself, promising that once he grew up, he would listen to the full speech on what it means to be a man. The 2 thus made a promise. In the blink of an eye, the harvest season arrived. The seeds they had planted earlier bore abundant fruit, but due to a bumper crop, they ate corn for a whole month. In addition, they also acquired a new fishing boat and a dilapidated second-hand airplane, clearly no longer satisfied with ground pleasures and eager to pursue the thrill of aerial drifting. That night, Walter took out the princess's photo again to examine it, then was attracted by the movement outside the house. He saw Garth walking alone toward the barn, pulling open a floorboard. and crawling into a secret cellar. Moments later, Garth took out a large stack of cash. After Garth left, Walter, who had witnessed everything, carefully lifted the wooden plank and saw a dense pile of cash inside. It turned out that the two uncles were millionaires. But was this money a gift from the chief, or was it, as rumors suggested, bloodstained dirty money? Walter was momentarily at a loss and dared not get close to his uncles anymore until that late night, when his long-absent mother returned by car, bringing along a newly met detective boyfriend. Walter realized he was not abandoned and felt excited. But May only cared about where the uncles kept their money. The detective further claimed convincingly that the two uncles were bank robbers. If Walter did not reveal the hiding place of the money, it would be considered deliberate concealment and would lead to big trouble. Walter was unsure of right and wrong and did not answer directly, but his subconscious action of looking toward the barn was still keenly noticed by the detective. Soon after, the detective took Walter alone toward the barn. After losing sight of his mother, the detective struck Walter heavily, forcing him to reveal the hiding place of the money. It turned out that the detective was a lazy con artist, and his relationship with May was merely a scam for money and lust. On one side was a hypocrite who threatened with harsh words and violence. On the other were the two uncles who treated him like family. At this moment, Walter chose to trust the latter. So, when the con artist relaxed his guard, Walter first kicked him hard, then ran inside to seek help from his uncles. As a result, Walter was quickly tackled to the ground by the pursuing con artist, while the con artist was overpowering Walter alone. The lion, sensing the commotion, tore at the con artist recklessly. When the uncles came out with hunting guns, the fight was already over. The con artist was badly injured, but still alive, while the old lion, overwhelmed by excitement, stopped its heartbeat. Seeing this, Walter burst into tears. The uncles comforted him, saying, "It fought for you until the last moment. It is truly the king of the forest, a real African beast." The next day, Walter dressed in a suit and solemnly buried the lion in the cornfield. After packing his luggage, Walter prepared to leave with his mother. Before parting, Hub said to the con artist, "You should be thankful that the lion acted before us. Otherwise, you wouldn't have seen the sun today." As he spoke, Walter came over, thinking that they might not meet again for a long time. All three felt somewhat sad. Even the smallest animals that initially did not welcome Walter now gathered around him. Unwilling to leave. And no matter how reluctant they were inside, they had to part temporarily. The car gradually disappeared into the dust, and Hub angrily said, "Why not hire a lawyer to fight for Walter's custody? May is not a qualified guardian to begin with. If it comes to it, forcibly take Walter back." However, all of this was nothing but a pipe dream. Meanwhile, Walter, immersed in sadness, learned that his mother had no intention of leaving the con artist. Extremely disappointed, he disregarded his safety and forcibly jumped out of the speeding car. May immediately applied emergency brakes and then got out of the car to catch up with Walter. Confused, Walter wondered why his mother always depended on men, why she endured hardships, was repeatedly deceived, yet remained stubborn and unrepentant. May was not willing to live such a life. It was just that her understanding was shallow, and she was helplessly swept along by the times, only able to sink into awareness and sorrow. However, when Walter begged his mother to make a decision that was good for both mother and son, she immediately understood what it meant. Walter returned alone to his two uncles and made 3 strict demands. 1. Before I finish university, you must live with me and participate in various school activities. 2. Take care of your health, eat more vegetables, and eat less meat. 3. Do not fight, take risks, or fly airplanes. The uncles, full of helplessness, agreed to all. Time flies like an arrow, and years pass like a shuttle. In the blink of an eye, Walter graduated from university and became a comic artist, hiding stories of himself and his uncles within his strokes. One day, he suddenly received a call from the police. His 2 octogenarian uncles, flying a second-hand airplane, headed towards the sky amid laughter and joy, becoming an eternal chime in heaven and earth. They unfortunately encountered an accident upon landing, but it was a painless departure, and their lives were complete. Walter drove back to the old house, where the police chief handed him a will from his uncles. The letter stated that all the inheritance belonged to Walter, and the bodies should be buried in a cornfield, sleeping alongside lions. Feeling deeply moved, a helicopter slowly landed, and a man in a suit stepped out. Confronted with Walter's confusion, the man explained, "I saw the news of your uncle's death on international channels. When I was a child, Grandpa often told stories about them, saying they were the most awe-inspiring opponents. I am here on behalf of Grandpa to see your uncles off." It turned out that the man was the grandson of the chief. His appearance also confirmed that every story told by the uncles was true. Looking at the cruise ship purchased by his grandfather before he died, the two men of the next generation exchanged a knowing smile. They had all heard the same story, and perhaps in the future, they would become the best brothers, writing an extraordinary story together.